Hello, folks. Welcome to Humanity Now podcast. Today, our guest is Yavor Tarinski. He's back talking about his newest book. Hello, Yavor. How are you?
Hello, nice having you. Thank you for having me again.
Good, great. Well, we'll jump right into the questions. What does concepts for democratic and ecological society mean?
Well, it's a title that I chose because for years now I have been reading and writing about different concepts that were developed or were into the process of being developed in a quite the grassroots participatory manner. So it was concepts that were developed simultaneously by activists, by social movements, but also by scholars and other type of thinkers. So they were uh, kind of radical, revolutionary type of concepts that all revolved around the idea of creating a society that is both genuinely democratic and also genuinely ecological, in the sense that they describe patterns towards a society that goes beyond the representative system that we have today, but a real democracy based on real participation and ecological in the sense that is more than the environmentalist green capitalist proposals of the today's system, but instead it's a real rethinking of our relationship with the nature, with the nature that we are part of.
Excellent. What are some of the concepts you cover in the book?
Yes, so of course, there are quite many concepts. There are a lot of chapters, but some of the concepts that intrigue me are the ones of the commons. There is also concepts such as libertarian municipalism, degrowth, and many others. Um, but there is always this common thread among all of these concepts, and that they're all based on direct democracy and ecology. So, direct democracy in this sense, it's uh, as I said before, much more than the system that we have today. What we have today, the representative oligarchic systems that we have come to know all around the world, they are actually pseudo democratic because they don't really create the space where people can participate directly. Because democracy means exactly that, demos kratos, the people exercising directly the power. So I'm interested, and I have been working with concepts that have at their core this exact element, this element of real people power. And so I find that, for example, in the worldwide discussion over the commons, be it theoretical or practical, there is, of course, a lot of reformism. There are a lot of people and groups that are one in one way or another related to the system today that try to water down the commons and turn them into some kind of like alternative economic model which to be embedded into the system that we know today. But ultimately, there is always this potential that is latent all over the discussions of the commons, and is the potential of people getting together and deciding collectively of how they should manage vital resources or generally things upon which their livelihood depends on. And the same is also with concepts like degrowth, for example. There are some thinkers like Serge Latouche, for example, who try to somewhat um, reformize the revolutionary potential of the degrowth body of theory, but ultimately it is almost always the degrowth discussion moves along lines of direct participation by the people, citizen empowerment, and also reframing our relationship with nature, rethinking our needs in terms of energy, of waste, etc. So all the concepts that I examine in this book are related in one way or another around these two main pillars for me, the direct participation of the people and the question of ecological reframing of our needs and our attitude towards the living world around us.
Excellent. What inspired you to write the
I'm sorry.
What inspired you to write the book?
Yes, this is a very nice question. Thank you about it. It's actually my fifth or sixth book that I write so far, and the inspiration is always the same. Since I'm not an academic, I am not a scholar. I do not work in an ivory tower in a university or anything like that. For me, all my writing is in a way um, a form of political action. I am politically active in my everyday life. I participate in grassroots collectives, in social movements throughout the Balkans, and I also participate in transnational organizations that try to develop um, collective knowledge, etc., and enrich our the palettes of revolutionary theories, etc. So, for me, the only reason of writing books or texts, it's always the same. It's political action. It is an effort of mine to advance certain ideas that I want to be promoted more. That there is no enough space given to, and also help into developing further these concepts, ideas, projects, etc. So I always hope that my books will be could play a certain role for people to get to think more radically, to think beyond the mainstream today, to think beyond the parameters of the system that we know today, and to actually challenge the crisis, the multi-layered crises that we face, like war, economic hardship, environmental degradation, etc., etc., and to look at the roots of all these problems, which is domination of one person over the other and of human beings over nature. So this is the main reason behind this book, as well as the others that I have written.
Excellent. You speak a lot about Murray Bootkin and Cornelius Castiatis. How have they influenced you?
Well, I have quite few names that you'll see occurring on this book as well as previous books of mine, but no doubt the biggest influences on me are Cornelius Castoriadis and Murray Bookchin. Um, I find them really inspirational. They are both thinkers that were not prisoners to ideological dogmas, and this it's also true to a thinker that I know it's a favorite of yours, of CLR James, and it's also of another thinker that I deeply respect, and it's Hannah Arendt. So it's these type of thinkers that are not afraid to go beyond their ideological dogmas in search of revolutionary perspectives that are relevant to our time. So both Castoriadis and Bookchin were from their beginning till their end, they were very interested into getting people empowered, of creating the institutions that will maintain this empoweredness. They were not interested in developing a blueprint, but they were interested nevertheless into developing certain ideas, certain values, and advancing them and defending them against bad-hearted opponents that try to say that these are childish ideas, that direct democracy or a self-managed society is not possible. They defended against such ideas. They gave arguments, and they were very coherent. So that's why they both they distanced themselves from communism, because communism was really economistic. It was too much focused on economic relations and left too much space for the development of powerful bureaucracies and state power. And then they both, uh, in one way or another, either in the case of Kasturiadis, he kept his distance from anarchism until the end. He never joined it, although there were many similarities. While Bookchin passed through anarchism, but ultimately also moved beyond this, because also they were not satisfied um, with this idea that there could be a type of society of good individuals where no political institutions will be needed. So they believed in the necessity of political institutions that will maintain equality, that will maintain the potential for political participation. Participation is not something that we have by nature. It is something that we can learn to do. It is something that we can learn to value, but we must have the space to develop it, to accept it, to develop passion for it. So in the today's system, it is clear that there is no such space. There is the space for us being consumers, taxpayers, maybe vote casters once in every 4 years, vote for governments. But most certainly there is space where we can develop a citizen consciousness. There is no space where we can develop passion for politics. So what these two thinkers advanced was the idea that we should start developing such passion for politics, for political participation, for political equality in the cracks of the system, where the system was not so powerful, and to try to spread out then this passion.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to read a quote from the book, and it's a quote that I think is really, really strong. Give me 1 second, please. Sorry. Overcoming economicism toward direct democracy and ecology. Instead, we should abandon the growth doctrine altogether and direct our attention toward the already enormous pace of economic production. There is no point in enlarging to it even further. On the contrary, if we want to have any future on this planet, we have to degrow it. But this can have meaning only if we decide to share it equally. And this cannot be done by the state or other hierarchical extra social structures. For equality requires equal participation in the decision making by all citizens. Thus, here we speak for a major paradigm change and an altogether abandonment of the capitalist economism of Homo economicus and embracing of the social ecology of active citizens, impassioned about public affairs and consciousness of their sym- symbiotic relationship with nature. That's just an excellent quote, and it ties into what you were just saying before. My question, um, you go against hierarchy and the state quite a bit. Were you influenced by anarchism?
Yes, most certainly. I have an influence from the anarchist body of theory and practice, um, and more broadly from the libertarian tradition. Um, this quote that you just read, it in a way, it summarizes the general thrust of the book and of many of my other works. Capitalism is a type of social system that places an enormous emphasis on economics. So thinkers like Caro Polanyi and Cornelius Castoriadis have coined this term, economism, because it's in a sense the fetishization of economy. So everything is about economics, and thus what capitalism do is it separates the economics from all the other human spheres. It places it on a pedestal, and and it develops a web of bureaucratic relations through which it manages the economy, and everything else is being subjected to this interpretation of the economy. Um, and unfortunately, Marxist theory has also entered into this trap. From its inception, Marx himself was really putting a lot of emphasis on economics. And I would argue that it is not by chance that it was from this body of theory that totalitarian systems, such as the Bolshevik and the Stalinist states, emerged. Because when you put so much emphasis uh, into economy and on and not enough on nothing anything else, then you create certain preconditions. So since the economy is so important, then there could be some technocratic institutions like the free market capitalism that will manage it. Or in the case of the Soviet Union, for example, we could have a group of party functionaries, enlightened party functionaries, that are well known and have a great knowledge into Marxist theory, etc., to run in a totalitarian manner the economy. Um, there is not enough emphasis in such theories, in the economistic type of theories. There is not enough emphasis on the political field in order to determine that the management of society will not turn into a totalitarian nightmare. For example, capitalism today is itself for being, the king of individuality, of personality, etc. In comparison, for example, to the Marxist, communist type of totalitarian regimes of the past. But we see that the capitalist neoliberal states of today have managed in a totalitarian-like manner through this bureaucratic web that they have spread all over the planet through the so-called globalization to and impose a specific way that is almost it's a totalitarian in unseen proportions. So we have people all over the world wearing the same clothes, listening to the same type of music, reading the same stuff. So we see that there is no place for individuality in this. It is as bureaucratic as the communist regimes used to be and as the fascist regimes used to be. Um, and so what I advance in the book is that states, oligarchies, political parties are all part of such political architectures that allow for economy to be fetishized. So you have such institutions in the capitalist systems, in the communist totalitarianisms, in the fascist regimes, etc. What advance instead is that we should play a specific attention on politics. From its inception until today, with determining the laws, the rules according to which we live, and how we will determine these rules. So, put the political question, you directly pose the question of, and for me, and in all, this is a central theme, as well as in most of my works, be it on more theoretical level through books, but also in practical level through grassroots collectives in which I participate. So this is for me the crucial question, not what blueprint for new economic model will, but who will decide. And for example, Bookchin have proposed that in what he has termed libertarian municipalism, a concept that uh, expand upon in the book, economy in such direct democratic, such as the libertarian municipalist one, the economy will be slowly absorbed by the political sphere. And why is that? Because the demos, the people, take the decisions that concern them in the municipal assemblies and councils. These councils will not deal exclusively with one set of issues of other. They'll have to do with thing, the whole life of people in common. So there will be issues that will with the environment. They'll have to do with culture, with education, but also with economy. And of course, we don't mean that in this assembly all the citizens will discuss with the smallest detail all of these questions. It is true that in such assemblies there is potential to develop the framework within which all these spheres will function, and all the committees and councils that will manage in each of these spheres separately will have to be responsive to this general assembly, will be under its control. So in this sense, the economy will stop being a thing that is being managed by the state or by the capitalist markets. Instead, is being managed by the people, all of them, by all of society in common. And in this sense, it goes along with other things. So just an example, for example, Switzerland today, that is being advanced by some advocates of the today system, that it's a kind of an alternative because they do referendums from time to time. The truth is that there, like in other places, the referendums that they can invoke can often cannot affect the economic sphere. They do not have the right to affect. So we see that the economy is elevated above the political sphere. While in the communities of the Zapatistas, for example, or in Rojava in the Middle East, which are two examples of radically democratic communities that exist today, we see that in the communes of the Rojava neighborhoods or in the caracols, in the Zapatista communities, we see that people discuss all spheres of life in common. They discuss everything that concerns them. And in this sense, the political issue of who decides determines all the other spheres. So the education is being turned into a more participatory effort. Economy is being turned into a more cooperative one, etc., etc. So they do not. So what I propose is that we do not tackle each sphere of our collective coexistence separatedly, and for example speak for economic democracy or democratic education, but we tackle the root of all this, and this is of how we will relate to all the issues, and this is the political matter. And for me, the answer of this is direct democracy.
Exactly. And that brings me to my next question. You talk a lot about direct democracy, and you've just explained a lot about it. What does it mean to you?
Yes, so direct democracy, it's we have come to, in active circles, for example, we have come to understand direct democracy as a kind of, so um, a collective is direct democratic because it works with assembly and everyone has a voice and participation making. Or a cooperative, for example, is direct democracy. There is an assembly and people take decisions collectively. But direct democracy is to a certain level, certain type of institution, participatory and open to participation, etc. And but it is also something more than that. It is also a regime, like Cornelius Castoriadis used to say. Since it is a regime, simply a participatory grassroots assembly. It is not simply a worker council or a municipal council. It is also all these things together. To just have one assembly or a referendum taking place once in a while does not make a society direct democratic. Direct democracy means having a whole set of tools, of processes working in synchronized. Um, Means also that you do not leave space for any type of oligarchic institutions to take place. And it means having um, a specific anthropological type, I would call it, a specific type of human being that is growing and it is developing within such institutional framework. So it is a type of people that have developed passion for politics, have developed a great interest in public affairs. We understand that what we have today, the anthropological type of today's society, of neoliberal capitalist societies, it's a very politically passive type of anthropological type. Its only passion is buying a new type of iPhone or smartphone or whatever, buying a good car, going to vacations, etc. Or it is the type of the East European doomer that sees the future very gloom, and it's very cynical. Um, no, it's all these anthropological types are very cynical, very passive, and very conformist, exactly because they are being formed within the political architecture of today's oligarchic capitalist societies. So if we begin creating a network of assemblies, of councils, of procedures such as sortition, that is selection by lot, and not through elections, and many other such mechanisms, tools, processes, etc. And we start also developing such an radical, democratic, and ecological type of anthropological type of a person. Then we can start speaking of real direct democracy. Um, we must be careful to not fall in the trap and call direct democracy just any referendum, because we know most of the dictators um, and authoritarian leaders have at some point or other spoke about direct democracy. They have used referendums in order to justify their autocratic rule. But the truth is that direct democracy includes two things. It includes a democratic society, but also it includes democratic and individuals. Are interlinked. They cannot a really democratic setting. Then you have started creating also a truly democratic individual. So this is direct democracy for me.
Excellent. I have one more question. You speak a lot about cities and the city state in the book. What do you think future cities will look like?
Yeah, okay. This is an interesting question. I am very interested in urban issues on cities. And I would like to clarify why. Cities, from their very inception, were a place that united human beings that were not related through blood, through a tribal belonging. What united them was a political agreement. It was a mutual solidarity. It was things that were political that united them. So, in a sense, cities have a strong political essence that can be used in the direction um, of a genuinely direct democratic and ecological society. Uh, Cities are much more prone to the direct management by citizens. I mean, a citizen as a term means exactly a person that is deeply interested and takes responsibility for his or her city. So in this sense, for me, the city has a revolutionary potential. Direct democracy, the way it was born in a city, in an independent city in ancient Athens. We know Castoriadis spoke about it a lot, Bookchin spoke a lot about it, Hannah Arendt spoke about it, C.L.R. James spoke a lot about it. Of course, the ancient Athens had a lot of shortcomings, but it showed us what it is that for a large number of people to collectively manage a city with different tools that prevented to a large degree hierarchies to emerge. Of course, there was sexism, there was patriarchy, but still there were certain elements that are useful for us today, like sortition, like general assembly deliberation, etc. Today, of course, I'm not naive. I see how cities have become. They have become temples of capitalist growth. Often, um, the cities, the very territory of cities produces value. There is no need. The cities themselves are hubs of economic growth today. They have also grown, coming to be a huge, um, how to say, a huge polluting monsters. They are unsustainable. They host huge amount of people. They're like mini states, or in some cases like in India or in China, they're like small empires with tens of millions of people inhabiting them. And of course there is a strong oligarchic rule in such cities, but this does not mean that I'm willing to abandon the city as a concept and to call for a retreat to a kind of over romanticized type of agrarian life. No, I do think that there is still space, a lot of space for recreating our cities along democratic lines. Of course, this will mean detaching them from the dogma of constant economic growth, the dogma of consumerism, and instead to charge them with new significations, such as the one that I examine in the book. We have seen many urban movements around the world trying to reclaim the public spaces there, trying to set up alternative political institutions. We have seen this in the movement of the squares that started shortly after the Arab Spring. Um, but also in the Arab Spring, of course. We saw it in the Occupy movement, we saw it in the Indignatus in Spain, in the Akanaktismeni here in Greece. Later on, we saw it in other parts, like in Bosnia, and the plenums that emerged on public squares. So in all these cases, we saw it in Turkey and the Gezi Park. So it was in all these cases that citizens gathered together and they tried to actually open space where they could act as citizens, because like I said before, politics and democratic politics, they need a space. They need a space where the person can act as something more than a consumer or a taxpayer or a vote caster. If we want to act as citizens, we must create a space where we can act as such, where we can take decisions. We cannot simply take decisions over internet. It is not the same. We do not feel um, our city in the same way. It is being present with your body and mind on a public square, surrounded by your neighbors, and discussing the future of your neighborhood, and having all the city function on such a basis as a federation of such autonomous neighborhoods, means of you actually experiencing with every part of your body the responsibility of being a citizen, of carrying your city uh, on your back together with all your co-citizens. This is the evolutionary potential of cities, and that's why I put so much emphasis on it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Javor. That was a great interview, and I ask that all the viewers please go out and read Concepts for Democratic and Ecological Society by Yavor Tarinski. It's available out at the bookstores May 28th, 27th, and it's a great book. You should read it. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me.